Jeff, welcome to In the Weeds. Thanks for having a conversation with me.
Sure. Thanks for the invite, Cassidy.
Yes, well, it's nice to have another conversation because we've actually now met in person. So now our online conversations are grounded in some sort of reality and not uh, internet hearsay.
Yeah, that's right. I'm working my way through my in-person checklist. I've got you, I've got Job, I've got Luke, I've got Shelly, who I don't know if anybody knows who Shelly is anymore, unfortunately. Um, and a few other people, handful of other people. Sam, Jacob, uh,
It's
my
funny. I got
cat's
an
tail.
email. I got an email the other week or like maybe last someone asking about Shelly because I had a really early conversation with her on my channel, and he was like, I don't know if you know this, but how is Shelly doing now? And it was nice. But
It's awesome.
yes, yeah. So if anybody wants to know Shelly, she's got lots of beautiful conversations preserved. But I actually just talked with her privately last week, or like no, yeah, this week, like 2 days
hmm
ago. So it was really nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, and of course, I've met Faraday in person now, and you guys were so gracious to offer to host us for our little
Oh yeah.
weekend trip to the Netherlands, my son and I. So that was fun, and thank you again for, being our host and our Uber driver and I'm,
Oh
I
wait,
think I'm getting
you're frozen
choppy.
a little bit. We're having a little bit of online viewers. We're having a little bit of recording technical tech difficulties. I think we'll figure
Okay.
it out in post, but if there's any like blank stares, that's why. But no, it was really lovely hosting you guys. No, I we really enjoyed it, so you could come, and now I'm glad to have you here.
Yeah,
So so
I'm not sure
obviously
if
this is something you're.
it
I
looks
think you're
like
in
I'm back.
time. Yeah,
Well,
you're in.
okay, I'm a little bit back. Yeah, just in post to continue my quick thought. Thank you for being our Uber drivers and kind of our tour guides, our walking tour guides the first day and our driving tour guides the next day to have the best Dutch apple pie in the Netherlands and then to go have pancakes at Job's house. So that was a fantastic trip, fantastic experience and great memories. And also the fair in the Netherlands, the various foods that you gave us, which I
Mm.
can't even remember the names of. Uh, what is it? Bitterball?
Bit Bitterbolla,
Bitterbolla?
poffertjes, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Haring.
yeah,
Although that was Job's what is it? Job's contribution to the food tour.
yeah.
No, no, I hope we gave you the true Dutch experience. So, or at least a little taste of
It's the most authentic Dutch experience I've ever had. So,
it. Well, that's not saying much, but I appreciate it. All right. So, this is something I am doing new on the channel, which is basically kind of creating space to talk more practically about what it is that we are doing to try to cultivate meaning in our lives. Doing that for myself, but with other people that I love, that I cherish, who I think that they have a lot of wisdom to share. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a little passage from this book. And I want to start with it because I think it really gets at the heart of not only like the name of this series, but sort of um, what I hope this can do for people as a whole. And then I'll take it over for you to kind of do an introduction. Does that sound good?
sure.
Okay. Okay. So every heart should be a little garden. We should keep it always clear of weeds and full of sweet and beautiful plants and flowers. A garden spot is not only a thing of beauty, but is also a blessing to all who see it. So, Jeff, who are ya? And what would you say your garden spot is that you are tending?
Oh, wow. Who am I? That's the big question that actually has to do with the garden spot that I'm tending right now.
Mm.
So I guess a little background on who I am. I'm just your average Mo, who started watching YouTube and was listening to podcasts, right around the mid-teens, early teens of this century that we find ourselves in. And eventually, like I think probably many people that you have on your channel, Cassidy, found Paul Vanderklay by one route or another, and then found each other
Yeah.
through him. He's a really good connector that way. Um, And so, early on, the Bridges of Meaning Discord was set up. That's, how we got connected. And I think there are other conversations that you and I have had about that. But suffice it to say, I've met many people like you through this space, like Luke, who I think just posted on your channel, or you just posted a conversation with him on your channel this morning. Well,
Yeah.
the morning of this recording, just to kind of give away the
Yes.
secret sauce of when we're having this conversation. And I haven't watched that one yet. My cat just somehow turned on my Bluetooth headphones. So hopefully my laptop doesn't switch to those. Hang on. Let me
Oh
let
no.
me turn these off. Oh, okay. No, it was just my Bluetooth speaker. I still don't know how she did it. Anyway, um, yeah, so just really have enjoyed meeting, excuse me, people like you, people like Luke, just the various people who are very warm and welcoming, whether they're that way whenever they're on camera or behind the camera, to a person, everybody that I've interacted with on a personal level. Even some of the more thorny personalities that people have a hard time liking or getting along with, I've had fantastically beautiful, interactions with them, either online in non-recorded conversations, recorded conversations as well, but also in person. One of those people that's tied into all this being Chad, our mutual friend that is known as Chad the Alcoholic.
Yeah.
He and I have had a handful of unrecorded conversations, and I don't need to say anything about Chad that I won't be saying anything about Chad that people don't already know, that he's just incredible. He's fantastic. And Chad, one of the things that links Chad and I is alcohol. And of course, I've drank alcohol, but I never got addicted to it. It just didn't take. It's not that I didn't try. I did. Oh, and I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable, so I'll pause if it looks like we're frozen, but I'll keep
No,
talking
it's
until,
okay. I think I'm hearing you. Yeah, I think I'm hearing most of what you're saying. There's a little bit
yeah,
of like skipping sometime.
yeah. Okay, well, I'll keep going then, and we can cut out. Well, I'll trust you to do what needs to be done. Um, so Chad and I were
We'll
having a
figure it out.
conversation. Perfect. Chad and I were having a conversation like getting close to a year ago now, better part of it, almost a year ago. And I was just talking to him about, some of the things that I'm dealing with in my life. I had an alcoholic parent who has since passed away. And I was just telling, Chad about some of the things that I'm dealing with now. He passed away several years ago, so I don't really have an active alcoholic in my life. And he said, "Well, have you ever tried Al-Anon?" And I was like, "No, I think I've heard of that, but I've never tried it." And he said, you might consider giving it a shot. And for those who don't know, Al-Anon is not Alcoholics Anonymous. Al-Anon is for people whose lives are affected by someone else's abuse of alcohol. Um, Mhm. And so he was great. He even after our conversation, like went and found he sent me a link to local meetings in my area, and he couldn't say enough about it because it's an adjacent program to Alcoholics Anonymous. It works in cooperation with them.
Yeah.
Um, so right around Thanksgiving last year, a little bit week before Thanksgiving, I started attending. And he was right. It just like really stuck and was really helpful. And then there's an adjacent program to
Mm.
that called ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, and people
Mm.
in families of dysfunction. And so the garden that I've been tending recently is my own, and just digging down into the various practices of that program, helping you learn really important things. And I don't think I watched your 12-step conversation with Chad,
Mm.
but I am getting started in the steps of actually those two programs, and really building back up that foundation of realizing that, hey, ultimately I am not in control of, I have no control over one of the ways that uh, my sponsor says it is people, places, and things. I have no
Mm.
control over people, places, and things. The
Mm.
closest thing that I have influence and a little bit of control over is one person, and that's myself.
Right.
And the biggest piece of that when you're laying the foundation of this program is understanding that y you are out of control. And the way that you kind of start to get control is to start seeing things in a more sane way and finding more serenity. And the way that you do that is conceptualizing this, power that's in existence that's greater than yourself. And Alanon doesn't try to push a particular view of God on anyone. It's kind of very similar to, I think, some of the approaches that have been happening with people that are adjacent to the TLC space. Like I think the first person that comes to mind is like an Ayan Hirsi Ali and her story about
Mm-hmm.
how she was meeting with her therapist or someone like that, if I remember the story correctly. But they said, what would somebody who is God, look like to you? And I hear all of my evangelical, conservative fundamentalist training like rushing back in right now, just like you do not set up a God of your in your own,
Your own understanding, yeah.
understanding, that's not who God is, and you're setting up an idol at that point. Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying, and yes, there is some truth in what you're saying, and there is a danger to, following the highest good at all costs, especially if that highest good is not directionally accurate. Um,
Mm.
you know, one of my favorite influences that I've talked about too many times that it probably makes people sick if they've watched all of my videos, which hopefully they haven't, is C.S. Lewis. And in one of his books, I think it's Mere Christianity, he talks about how when you're teaching a child to draw a circle, um, you'll you might hold their hand and help them to draw it, or they might have an idea of a circle that they're trying to draw, and it's all crooked and it's not perfect. But as soon as they actually got to see a perfect circle for the first time, they would be like, ah, that's the thing that I'm trying to get to. Yes, that's it. And so the circle, although jagged and imperfect, was directionally accurate. It's moving closer and closer to what that real thing is. And
Right.
um, even that concept isn't really necessary for you to start, approaching healing in the two 12-step programs that I'm involved in. It is, though, just understanding that there is a power greater than me that's out there that can help make my life manageable and
Mm.
equip me, not with the tools to uh, change I mean, to change the actions of the people around me and the things that happen to me that are completely out of my control every day, but equips me to be able to handle those in a healthy way when they come along. And so there's a lot of
Mm.
deep work in understanding, well, how is it that I'm seeing the world that is really, pardon my French, funked up. um, and I'm starting to learn that there's a whole lot of ways, that I look at the world and that I interact with people that is really just distorted. So it's
Mm.
working with the people in the program and my sponsor and the various, materials that they have to just kind of help you process through this.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
that
thanks for
helps you to
sharing
see
that.
that. Yeah,
Yeah. Are we back on normal, or are
I
we
can
still
see you. Yeah,
okay?
I can
I
see
think
and
we're
hear you.
good.
I think we're
Okay,
back
good.
to normal.
I think we're
Yeah,
back to normal, but I was afraid I was a little delayed. But no, thanks for
yeah.
sharing all that. And yeah, I've been to Al-Anon meetings before because I've had various friends and family who have done with that, and it can be really, really helpful.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's kind of beautiful the way those meetings too of how vulnerable people are allowed to be in that like safety there. So
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, thanks for sharing. Well,
Sure.
what I'm gonna do now is just read. This book is the spiritual diary of the Empress of Russia,
Hmm.
the one who was martyred, and the Romanov Empress.
Oh, wow.
And I was given this book by my, or yeah, Faraday godfather,
Mhm.
And it's just chock full of these beautiful little sayings about life and uh, marriage and all those things. So I'm just going to read a couple of the little entries that she has in here, use it as a jumping off point. And if anything resonates with you, great. If not, we can kind of go from there and yeah, keep talking about yeah, what it looks practically like to kind of weed through our lives and figure out how to yeah tend the gardens, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm probably gonna read. They're really short, some of them, so I'll probably read 3 of them, and then we'll just see what resonates. Okay.
Okay.
Um, God will be rendered to good by any, but a Christian should be good even to those that deceive, betray, and bring them harm. What people close to us need the most is simple kindness. And the last one, the kindest thing that a teacher can do for his disciples is to teach them to lead a life full of faith and courage, the life of winners. So, do any of those resonate with you? Do you need me to reread them? Um,
I mean, the word that sticks out is kindness. I remember there was some kind of live stream. It might have been on Chad's channel uh, a week or two ago, where the topic of kindness versus can't remember the other word came up. Anyway, that's all that it reminded me of. And sometimes kindness, I think, is a difficult word to navigate because I think to it it's a word that can kind of it's elastic and it can kind of
mhm,
take on several different meanings to different people. For some people, kindness just means just full out compassion. And then there's another one that's very elastic. Well, what's compassion? What's the compassionate thing to do? Is it to let to continue to enable the drug user because it seems like that's giving them, what it is that they need, but I can also see that it's destroying them. And if I, play a part in trying to take the thing away from them that's killing them, is that very kind? Are they seeing it as kind? Is it possible to be kind to someone when they see it as the exact opposite?
mhm.
Um, and these are all questions that I don't have answers to. It's a
Yeah.
difficult thing to navigate. Yeah.
No, I think about that idea of kindness also because, um, yeah, kindness is, yeah, it's one of those fudgy words that it's
Hmm.
like, what is a kind action? What does that mean? And how do we navigate kindness when sometimes what looks kind or what is kind doesn't seem it?
Hmm. Yeah.
But I think too, really just kindness in relationship to the internet. That's something that I have lots of questions about
Hmm.
because it's so easy to one lose sense of kindness because of how disconnected it can be and how sort of otherworldly it can feel just because it's not
Hmm.
tangible to us in the here and the now.
Yeah.
But there's the other side of like how not to judge others' kindness, but be a judge of my own kindness in
Hmm.
in place of that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's been something I've been thinking about a lot. And then obviously being a new mother, it's like how do you be kind to your children? How do you
Hmm.
be kind yet unwavering in the things that move them to be better people? That's really
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, parenting is a tough job, and my kids are adults now, and I look at them and I just think, oh my gosh, what are all the things that I've done, that I hope are not gonna, cause problems for you down the line or are causing problems for you, right now. Yeah, again, that has to do with, getting my filters of seeing the world right and making peace with my past and all those sorts of things and just doing what I can with what I have that's in front of me. So yeah,
Yeah.
but kindness, I think in some cases there are situations I think where it is pretty obvious to say, yeah, I think that's probably the kind thing to do is, not to yell at somebody and to cuss at them whenever they're saying something that you don't like. That's probably not the kind thing to do. So,
Right, right.
but there are some cases, where it's a higher level uh, uh, a higher level exercise in determining, okay, what is the best next step for me to take in this conversation, in this relationship, in this situation that I find myself in traffic, all kinds of things. So yeah, that's
Mm.
that's what the word kindness made me think about.
Mm. Yeah, it feels like in like modern world, kindness has sort of been lost as a virtue.
Mm,
Like to be kind is to be a fool.
hmm.
To be kind is, yeah, in some ways a folly, because you're opening the door to potentially, um, how would you say it, enabling a behavior or a behaviors that, um, might not be virtuous in and of themselves. But I don't know. I think there's something more nuanced to kindness and this balance of it. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, it almost seems like maybe the world is split into two kind of fields, where one, kindness is not a virtue at all, and then the other, kindness is the only virtue we should ever seek.
Right.
And I don't think that's probably true, but it can feel that way. Um, and yeah, it's like, how do you balance that? How do you know? And I mean, I think it's been helpful for me being planted in a tradition. Um, it's me to understand and orient in a story of, okay, how can I look to what it means to be kind by living through and understanding the stories that have come before me and the people who are living within that story now. I think it becomes a lot harder when you do have this sort of lack of faith in a tradition that helps point to you. Kind of like the AA model, right? To look to God of your understanding. I always kind of saw that as seek God as best as you can at this moment,
Yeah,
right?
I think that's right.
And for someone who can't see God at all,
Hmm.
oh, it must be an unbelievably hard way to orient what is kind, because you're left to public opinion almost,
Yeah.
and, and that changes so frequently.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems more difficult than it should. Something. It seems to be more difficult than maybe it should be. I don't know.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it has become so difficult for us to like find kindness as a virtue and pursue kindness within ourselves?
Well, I mean, for me, uh, and this might just be a singular experience, it's easy for me to be kind when uh, the person is not bothering me or um, uh, it's like upsetting my sensibilities or is saying something that, not only do I disagree with, but I think like really pushes on, no, I think that that's actually wrong. Um, you know, and so it's hard for me to be kind in those moments when I'm, to use a bandied about term, triggered by something. It's really hard to be kind whenever I'm upset. And I don't know if there are more upsetting things in the world today than there were when my grandparents were my age. I'm tempted to say no, there's not. Do we have access to wider spread information across the whole world more immediately? Yes, we do. However, there's a part of me that says, well, that's just access to people, right? The things that are
Mm,
bothering us are, well, if you bring AI into it, what I was about to say is not true, but the things that are bothering us are primarily coming from people, right?
yeah.
And one of the things I noticed several years ago now is, before social media, a lot of the thoughts that people had, they kept on the inside, and so you never got to see or hear these things from people. But once they got things like social media, it's just like, oh, you get to hear everybody's inner thoughts who, well, not everybody, but you get to hear people who otherwise wouldn't be sharing their inner thoughts with anyone, feeling, very free to share them. Um, so maybe that's a little bit different, but I don't know. I don't know what it's like to live in a world where um, you see people in real life more frequently than we seem to do today in our circumstances. And like, were there were there maybe not as many occasions for like people just having no filter and sharing, their opinions in person? Um, There probably were. The frequency wasn't necessarily as high, but perhaps the intensity was higher, because you're right. To hear a very triggering thing, or sorry, to read a very triggering thing in a text or in a thread, or even to see it like on a video in social media is one thing. But to have that happen in flesh and blood, in person, that's a very different thing. Like, my career started
Mhm.
in customer service, but face-to-face customer service. So my very first job, for those who are looking for some Jeff lore, was working at the counter of a Domino's pizza, uh, taking
I
orders.
Pizza Hut.
Pizza Hut, there we go. See, knew there was
We
a
coined the
reason.
t- we together coined the term randos, and now together we're dominant pizza market for our
Hey,
first labor.
yeah,
Uh,
for our competing teams. I was wearing my blue jersey, you were wearing your red one. Um, but yeah, so customer service face to face is very different than because I worked a few jobs, customer service face to face, and then the job that led to the career that I'm in right now was customer service over the phone. I got an entry level call center position, and I would just tell people, I was just like, this is so much easier to have somebody yell at you over the phone than it is to have them yell at you straight to your face. That is such a different experience. Um, and so I guess I'm just riffing here, but my whole point there is, maybe the generations that didn't have social media maybe had these human and interpersonal interactions. Uh, I'm about to say perhaps a little bit rougher, not necessarily, everything balances out, but in some ways, it was probably a lot more difficult to be kind um, in those circumstances. I don't know. I'm just stabbing in the dark here, but perhaps. Um, so why is it more difficult now? I think your question, to be kind, perhaps, than it was back then. Uh, I don't know if I said your question correctly. I guess my answer to that question with what I just said is maybe it's no more difficult now than it was in the past. Maybe dealing with people
mm,
like this is always hard. Maybe
yeah.
loving your neighbor, and particularly loving your enemy, has always been difficult.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably true. It's just manifesting in ways that we've never really had experience with, because all of a
Yeah,
sudden, um, anybody is your neighbor, because even if they're around the world, like, it feels like just a connection away. So all of a
right.
sudden you have more of these connections, and then there's more of these cultural differences that make it hard to kind of figure people out. But I really liked what you were saying about how basically the internet is access to people more than anything else,
Hmm.
because it really is. I mean, and even AI, you can argue it's coming from people somewhere. They had
Yeah,
to design this that is now taking what people have done and refabricating it to, you know, seem intelligent.
yeah. AI is fruit of the poisonous human tree, so
Yeah,
it's no wonder that we would have problems with it.
yeah. Just more humans under humans under humans. Humans
Right,
all the way down.
all the way down.
Yeah. Um, so, given that the challenge that the internet has with this ability to be kind to human beings, Do you think it's helped you personally learn kindness better, or do you think it tempts you to be less kind?
I think early on, when I was first experiencing it with social media, I just I wasn't thinking. I was just like, oh, well, I'm just going to respond to this person, and I'm going to do it in, a way that uh, I would do it in person, but I'm going to make my point, and it's going to make sense to them. And then I remember probably my one and only big experience with this. I posted something. This was back in maybe 2015, 2014. I posted something in Facebook on something that, had happened in the news. And um, I was trying to make like a very salient and wise point. And then I just had people coming in, from both sides of this fight, like just jumping in and saying this thing. Well, yeah, but this and this, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I need to add something here because this is just going out of control. This isn't what I thought. Here, I can fix this. And every time it was just, digging the grave deeper and deeper. And so one of the things that I learned was, okay, I don't even need to pick the shovel up. If I see something, um, more than likely, I don't need to say anything about it, one way or the other. And perhaps that's my part of my more moderate nature coming into play too, because I have a little bit of apathy built into it as well. It's just like I'm not going to do anything to fix this, particularly by having this making my important view on quote unquote important view on this known. Um, and I like one of the things that I heard Paul Vanderklay talk about recently, which is, hey, you know from experience that you don't disagree with this person on topic A. Yeah, maybe you guys just sit down and have a conversation or have a meal and find something that you do have common ground on, something that you both actually really like. Like maybe you both like this type of food, or maybe you both like this band, which is crazy because you disagree on 99% of everything else. But you can just talk about how much you love about this thing, and you can dig down
Mm,
into that, and you can actually start to um, cultivate what is common between you and that other person. Um,
mm,
and there are extreme examples of, I think, where maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe it isn't a good idea. Maybe it's not a healthy place for you to be in relationship with that person because you're opening yourself up to actual, harmful treatment, whether that be physical or emotional, verbal type
mhm,
abuse, things like that. But I think just generally speaking, as an approach, I think it is good to, do your best when you find yourself in an interaction with another person where you feel like, oh, no, not only do I disagree with that, I think that is the stupidest thing that I've ever heard. And my first instinct is to, take a dump all over it. Uh, but maybe I can hold my tongue and maybe, we can shift the conversation to something else in a way that uh, doesn't further escalate things.
mm,
De-escalation, I think, is good, um, because perhaps when you're in a de-escalated state, when you and the other person or other group of people are in a de-escalated state, you actually might be able to move an inch forward or a centimeter forward for us for the Euros out there. Um, a centimeter forward towards resolving some of that conflict that's over in the 99% area of the things we don't agree on.
yeah. Well, I think the biggest like thing that moves the gap further is that loss of trust in other people. Like I've thought about this a lot, and you look at what changes people's minds. I think it's very rarely a good argument, but
Mm,
rather the trust that is gained by someone who is presenting you with something. And maybe an argument helps tip the scale of that trust level. but
Hmm.
people and trust and the faith that we in them as a human being is what changes our minds
Hmm.
versus the intellect that's coming out of that. It's so much more people centered than we give credit for.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think there's truth that if we lose the humanity of people, if we make them their idea and let that be the the temperature of a good bad person, a person worth engaging with, whatever, that create a lot more conflict and separation and a lot less ability to have kindness than um, when it's the other way around, where the ideas are the things that we're holding up. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, how do you find those places where we do have genuine love for something and foster that to open us up to maybe being able to talk about the things that we don't agree on, and how people together we can trust each other to come to better understandings of those mysteries. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And one of the things that that reminds me of, I was thinking about this actually earlier this morning. You know, there's a lot of, oh my gosh, especially at this time in our political cycle in the US, there's a lot of convincing or attempts at convincing going on. And what I've found in just my personal interactions, not even on the topic of politics, but when somebody is trying to convince me of something, even if it's the most logical or rational or sensical argumentation, if it doesn't feel like that person is trying to persuade me because they care about me versus they're just trying to get me to agree with them, those are two very different experiences. And I don't know if this is common across all, personality types because I have a very stubborn personality type where the more you want me to believe something and the more you're pushing on me, the less that I'm going to give you what it is that you're looking for. Um, Particularly in like very personal relationships, like my closest family
Mm,
members. The way to persuade me is not to push me and come at me directly and try to get me to, to try to force me to do anything. It's more like I guess I'm more like a cat in that way, is uh, just kind of go and do something else. And, if then I'll start wondering, wait a second, where did that person go? Why are they not, paying me any attention anymore or asking me about this? Let me go find them and ask some follow-up questions. So, yeah, I I just find that it's probably better to uh, at least from my perspective, it's probably better to say, hey, if you're interested in what I believe and you're wondering what I think about something, I'm happy to share that with you, but you don't have to hold the same view that I do. Um, it's not that crucial. And even if it is something super important, um, it's if it's that important, it's probably way too big for a single person to have control over it and fix it.
mm,
Um, if it's that important, it's probably going to take a whole lot of actions by a whole lot of people. And, again, I feel a part of, my brain like running in or people that I know and saying, and that's why you have to get involved politically and because that's how the masses move things. And so it is a big problem. And that's why I'm trying to tell you that
mm,
if you vote for this person or if you give money to this, campaign, that's going to fix all the world's problems. Or it's not going to fix all the world's problems, but it's going to fix this one, which is the biggest problem. And that
mm.
just wears me out. It makes me so tired.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, it's really tricky of like how do you have those conversations, especially if you have like a real moral instinct or something, right? because
Hmm.
I don't think I have the same. I'm also a very stubborn person, but I don't have that same stubbornness. I'm willing to listen to someone, even if they're trying to convince me. I do
Hmm.
have a little bit of a skepticism of like, if you're really just trying to convince me to push me into something, I'm going to be more
Hmm.
skeptical about it than if you're just, this is it. And I don't know if that's, again, like a human thing or just my personality. But yeah, there's
Hmm.
that sense of when you come at it too hard, I all of a sudden feel like you're selling me some sort of religion that
Hmm.
I'm not ready to buy into.
Yeah.
But there is that sense of like, I understand where it's coming from, especially this instinct of people want to create positive change, move towards the good. And yeah, I think it probably would be good if we all, as humanity, moved towards right beliefs and held them. But yeah, that sense of I have them all and let me tell you about them and convert you to them is very difficult for me as human beings because we're very flawed and we're very small in scope. Um, yeah. And like how do you find ways to be kind on both sides of that dynamic we find ourselves in as humans? One being convinced or attempting to be convinced, and the other trying to be the convincer of the beauty that we see in or the good or the true or all those things. Um, we haven't figured that. Well, I mean, will we ever figure that out? But we're struggling in it, especially in America. We're really really struggling in it, and I wonder if it has something to do with the evangelical nature of the culture that is America.
Mm, that's interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that. And like it makes me wonder too if like people like you and me are a little bit in a bubble and thinking, yeah, there's an evangelical nature to to American culture. There's certainly that dynamic there. So yeah, I mean, I'd have to give that more thought. That's very interesting. Because there, evangelical uh, from going out and, witnessing and converting perspective. There certainly seems to be a lot of that in politics. So I would say, I bet a lot of the people, who have left evangelicalism that they were raised in and, been pulled really into politics. You can take the evangelicalism out of the person, but you can't take or you can take the person out of evangelicalism, but you can't take it out
But
of
you
the
can't take
person.
the evangelical out of the person. Yeah.
Right. So it's just
Hilarious.
like, let me just switch to my other cause that I need to convert you to because I have a clearer view of what the truth is now, right? I'm seeing the
Yeah.
truth more clearly. I saw it only a little bit whenever I was in my evangelical church, but now that I've left that and I've widened, my scope a little bit, I think back to, some of our Rhett and Link conversations, just like, oh,
Mhm.
I can now see more of what the truth is. And I'm putting some words in their mouth, but that's kind of the general sense of, the experience. And it's just like, oh, well, now that I have a better sense, these are some more important causes for me to evangelize. So
Mhm.
yeah, I can certainly see that at the very least from that strain of the American culture. And uh, it's not like they're wandering into a completely different space in the political realm where that evangelicalism is not welcome and is not used, as a tool to further the goals of a particular political program.
Right. Well, and I grew up as an evangelical. I'm not by name anymore, but I know so much about myself that is that way because I grew up in it. Like you can't really just pull that out of you. It's
Hmm.
it's part of your culture, and I think I'm being transformed and changed in different ways, but there's a piece of that that stays, and I think that's good. I don't think
Hmm.
it's all bunk. But after leaving, I've kind of got more of the sense of like where evangelicalism came from and how it developed and all those things, and realizing how tied it was to politics and that
Hmm.
sort of intermingling of those two as they were developing made so much so much more sense of like my upbringing and some of the culture that I was in America. Was like, oh, okay, now
Hmm.
they're so married in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
So it doesn't surprise me, especially for destructioners. How would you call them?
De
Deconstructors?
deconstructioners,
De-
deconstructionists.
well, anyways, I could see how that movement towards more of a political alignment and
Hmm.
using that to move towards good is such a
Yeah.
natural flow.
Yeah. It makes
Yeah.
sense. It makes sense.
No, sometimes I feel like the oddball in the deconstruction world where like I went super trad. Like I didn't go like uh, crazy liberal or totally away from where I came from. I went even deeper. Like that
Right.
doesn't seem the story for most people. So I always feel like the oddball out. But then yeah, just watching it from kind of now the out like I'm an insider, but I'm an outsider in now,
Uh-huh.
and so yeah, it's that weird transition point where it's like I'm not quite an outsider because it is so much of my being because I grew
Mhm.
up in it, but I'm also not in it. I'm not an insider anymore. I'm like how do you call it? A what do you call like the people who leave things? Oh, that's such
Quitters?
a winners. Yeah, we're the winners.
Quitters, quitters.
Quitters. Oh, yeah. No, there's like a religious word, but I can't think of it. It doesn't matter. But yeah, you're kind of
Oh,
like,
oh,
yeah, in
apostates.
that weird kind of, yeah, thank you. That is the word I was thinking of that I couldn't get in my brain. Yeah, so you're kind of like this apostate to evangelicalism.
Uh-huh.
And I think for myself, I do have this sense of like love for the thing that I came from, but
Hmm.
also kind of like a bittersweetness of like, um, I'm so grateful for what it gave me, but also saddened by the that hurt me through it. And
Uh-huh.
so, and you kind of get this different sense of it when you're sitting on the outside looking in. And like I had a little bit of that kind of deconstructing. That's what you basically do. You kind of sit like an outsider looking in. You're still really in it. And so I'm not much in it anymore, but I am it, but not it. I think this might be very confusing, but that's how it feels to me. um,
No, I have somewhat of a similar experience. Like I was a horrible evangelical, and not in the way that people might think when I say that. I was a horrible evangelical from an evangelical perspective, from an insider's perspective, where um, I I didn't buy into oh, so here's where I'm going to spend all my time, and I'm just going to devote myself to the various programs of the church, and I'm going to, volunteer for this thing or for that thing. I was just like, no, I'll mainly just show up on Sundays and I'll take to heart, some of these things that seem to make a lot of sense to me, and I'll try to apply them to myself personally, and I'll try to live my life in such a way where, um, I bear the kind of fruit that they're talking about,
mhm,
um, and am actually not being hypocritical, and actually trying to follow God, and as Jesus talked about in the Gospels, you know, if you love me, you'll obey my commandments, and really trying to augur in on that, and say, well, am I loving God, uh, or am I just kind of sloughing off these things that I know probably need some tending or need some care? And so that was really where my focus was, and my focus wasn't a lot around the community that I think
mhm,
evangelicalism tries to push for, and the conversion thing. Like,
mhm.
it was not a high priority on my list just because it felt more awkward than anything else to just,
Sure.
go to random strangers and say, hey, have you heard the good news? That kind of stuff. It's just like, that is just so not how I want to relate to people. And,
Mhm,
I was always open to the idea of, well, if I felt like this is what God was asking me to do in the moment, to ask this person this very direct or specific question, if I really felt like that's what I was being asked to do in that moment, well, yeah, sure, I would do it. But just this idea of like going out on the street corners and quote unquote witnessing to people, I was just like, that does not seem like, that's not my cup of tea, is
Did you
kind of
did
my
you
my way.
Did you ever do it
Once, yeah,
once?
one time. And it was when I was a kid too. I never tried it
Mm.
as an adult. And by that time, I'd moved. I was in the era in my early 20s, early to mid 20s. It was in the mid to late 90s. And so I had gotten more involved in like a seeker sensitive church in the Dallas Fort Worth area, because I had stopped going to church for a while before I got pulled, before that kind of drew me back in, that approach. And there wasn't a lot of the, hey, as a church, we're going to go out and, have these witnessing events. It was more the highest level of witnessing for a seeker sensitive church was invite a friend and come check out our programming and hear our sermon series, and that's really going to draw them in. And it's fascinating. My first wife, actually, one of the first places that I invited her to was my seeker sensitive mega evangelical church, as kind of a litmus test to see, if she's going to like turn this down, then maybe we won't work out. But she was just like, oh yeah, I'd love to come, oh my gosh. And she went. It was so transformational, for her.
Mm,
Like the first message, she was like, I feel like he was talking like, directly to me about my situation and everything like that.
mm.
And so, that was the most I did as to do something as a quote good evangelical, was to invite someone to church that I would later get divorced from. And who, well, I won't say anything more about, that's their story. Um,
Mm.
So, but what I was gonna say is, because I found a lot of resonance with what you were talking about in your story, because uh, you know, I feel like people in the evangelical world like loved C.S. Lewis, like they turned me on to C.S. Lewis,
Mhm.
and the more I read, just the breadth of the various things that C.S. Lewis wrote. Most people know some of his hardcore apologetics works like Mere Christianity, and I think that's as far as some people read. Maybe they know the Screw Tape Letters, and they certainly probably know Narnia. If a lot more people know Narnia than even know like his theological writings.
Right.
Um, but man, if you really just start reading all of Lewis, you will find out how mystic and how weird he's a weird dude in
Mhm.
some of his beliefs, but I think they're weird like in a cool way. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. And if many of the evangelical people, that recommended to him to me, like have read many of the things that he's written that I've read, well, let me put it this way. Uh, I read Rob Bell's book. What was the one that put him on the map, just book wise?
Blue.
Love Wins. Blue Like
Oh,
Jazz is a different guy.
no, but he had something like Blue Elvis or something.
Oh, Velvet Elvis.
Velvet Elvis. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't
That's what
read
I'm
that
thinking.
one,
Okay.
but I read Love Wins because I knew a lot of,
Mm.
left-leaning-ish, like liberal theological spectrum people who were just like big into Rob Bell. And I know that Luke loved Rob Bell, not to paint him with a liberal left-leaning brush. He probably wouldn't hate me for doing it, but I know he loves Rob Bell. But I remember at one point, I finally sat down because my mother-in-law had Love Wins on her on her bookshelf, um, and I sat down. We were visiting. They live out of state. We were visiting them for the holidays, and there was just some slow time where we all just didn't have anything to do, and so I sat down and would read that book in the slow times while I was visiting for a week. And I remember him catching like all kinds of fire from, the evangelical right for the things that he had to say in that book. I remember Ravi Zacharias in particular, like saying, what is he saying here? This implies these things. And, Ravi Zacharias is kind of a pariah now
Yeah.
for some of the things that came out about him. But anyway, it wasn't just him. There were several people of that ilk who read that book. And, for the audience who's, listening to this right now has no idea who Rob Bell or Love Wins is, I think, um, I don't even know how to describe it, but I'll just stick to the point that I was trying to make. As I was reading Rob Bell, who I would say right-leaning evangelical Christianity probably doesn't have a lot of love for. Um, uh, as I was reading that book, having been steeped in so much C.S. Lewis that I had read at that point, I was just like, this really isn't that different from what I've read C.S. Lewis say 50
Mm-hmm.
years ago, 60 years ago. And even more so, his spiritual mentor, George MacDonald. I'm like, I didn't really read anything in that Love Wins book that diverged that much from some of the concepts or some of the things that I think Lewis believed about God.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just really fascinating to me as I delved more into Lewis that evangelicals like hold him up as a safe brand to engage with on your spiritual journey. Um, and so I have just found him incredibly, incredibly helpful. And so from an evangelical world perspective, I'm still kind of in it. I'm in more of a moderate kind of a center right leaning denomination in America. It's the Wesleyan Church,
Mm-hmm.
um, which was an offshoot of, Methodism, I want to say back in like the late 1800s. Um, but I think the point that I'm trying to make in all of this is I still feel you said a lot of appreciation for what it gave me. Um, I still feel a lot of appreciation for what it gave me, but also I, I feel a lot of like defensiveness when I see like right-leaning evangelicals, being attacked for their beliefs or um, positions that they hold, and just thinking, they're to the right of me, but at the same time, I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater on so
Mm-hmm.
many of their beliefs that they hold fast to. Um, I probably don't believe them the same way, or maybe I, disagree with some of their topics. But at the same time, I think there's a part of me at least that just says, no, I still don't completely dismiss, many of the topics that they're talking about, like
Yeah.
out of hand. And perhaps, that just paints me as a right-wing fundamentalist for even, having some uh
Sympathies.
sympathies. Thank you. That's the word that I was looking for. I give you apostate. I trade you that for sympathies. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very it's very interesting because I tend to have a lot of sympathies for a lot of people who think or fall into um, beliefs that are different than mine, even if it's in the Christian spectrum. But a lot of
Mhm.
that comes from the fact that I lost a lot of confidence in the things that I thought I knew 10 years ago. And I'm relearning what it is to be a Christian.
Mhm.
And like, I think there's something beautiful to that. There's also something terrifying about that. And yeah, there's like a level of kindness I have to remind myself to give to myself in the process of like relearning or reorienting this thing that was packaged to me in one way and that seems not to be like the quite the reality that I live, if that makes any
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but there's that kindness that becomes so natural in the sense of like, how can I be so um, unforgiving to someone who is so confident and zealous about something I don't agree with, when I might
Mhm.
have just been that confident and zealous about something I don't agree with now 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. There's that kind of, I don't know, there's that recognition that even if I don't agree with them, I think most people are trying to move towards the good.
Mhm.
There's probably a better way that we can work together on that so we can come to better, truer, good, beautiful answers about those things.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think, yeah, and I never read uh, Love Wins, but I do remember the Rob Bell thing when Rob Bell became sort of the evangelical uh, bad news. Because before, you'd be in youth group and you watch the Rob Bell videos and they were like cool and interesting. And then all of a sudden he has this book and then it becomes questionable. Oh, Rob Bell. And then it's like, but it
What's
was
happening to
all,
this guy?
yeah, but it was all really tied to the political and sort of
Yeah.
that early days culture war, which probably wasn't branded culture war then, of like trying to make Christian ethos the cultural norm.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think that sort of zealousness to protect that lost sight of the reality of the the whole uh, mystery of the spiritual life that we think we're walking in. Because take that without any political agenda or political sense on it. Love wins.
Hmm.
Well, isn't that a beautiful thing? Isn't that the whole point, right?
Right.
And I
Yeah.
don't know what his point was. I don't know if he was trying to be political, but that's how it got twisted and manipulated. And um, yeah, there's a big part of that political landscape that I think makes us lose kindness for what we perceive as our political enemy, even though as Christians, humans in and of themselves are not our enemies. Like even if they're participating in evil patterns, the human
Mhm.
themselves is not our enemy. They're a slave to an evil that um, you know we should at least have some sympathy for because we're slaves to our own evils.
Mhm.
That I mean, I don't know. That's how I feel, but it doesn't. Um, yeah, it doesn't always feel like that position is looked at as a positive thing because it doesn't win. And I don't
Well,
know if,
it's a very vulnerable position. Put yourself
yeah,
in. Because what's too far for a person to go for you to say, yeah, that person is just like irredeemable. That person cannot ever come out of their, the evil pattern, or as you were talking about the pattern that they're engaged in, thoughts of Lord of the Rings and, being under the spell or the control of the, ring of power.
yeah.
And it's funny. I really loved your conversation with Ferdy in this series to kick it off. Um, when he mentioned Tom Bombadil, um, and uh, I've only read the first two. Um, I haven't read The Hobbit, maybe parts of it, but I've read Fellowship of the Ring and I've read The Two Towers. I have yet to read Return of the King, but of course I've seen the movies
And no Samarillion, then I'm assuming.
and no Cimmerillion. And so when he mentioned the Cimmerillion, I was like, oh my gosh, is Tom Bombadil in that too? Because I was so delighted whenever I read Fellowship
Tom
of the
Bombadil.
Ring. Yeah, Tom Bombadil. Because I saw the movies first, and then I read the first two books that the movies are based on. Sorry, not the Hobbit movies. I'm talking about the OG trilogy.
Yes.
Yeah, the only real Lord of the Rings trilogy. TOG.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. I don't know what G means. The original. Anyway, I forget what I was trying to say. Uh, so the point is, when I was reading and I first encountered the Tom Bombadil character, I was like, I love this guy so much. I know he probably annoys people, but that was not my experience. Which is like, what? He can just grab the ring and hold it, and he's just laughing about it, and he just has this mirth about him, and the way he sings and talks to the trees. And I think he's the one that comes and rescues the hobbits from being trapped like in the roots of the tree. And he just starts talking to the tree and he goes, oh, you silly old tree. And, it's just like, because it was like terrifying for the hobbits and it just seemed like this awful thing. And he just walks in and he just has this, devil may care attitude about it, where he's just like, so, oh, this is just the way the trees act. Here, I know how to tickle this tree to make it start giggling and let go of you or whatever. And I don't remember exactly how he does it, but that's just the sense of what I got. And he's to spoil this part in the book, the hobbits come back and they stay with him. Um, and Frodo, of course, has the ring with him. And Frodo, I think, puts on the ring while he's sitting at the dinner table. and nobody else can see Frodo at the dinner table, but Tom Bombadil can see him while he's wearing the ring. And he's like, "Oh, Frodo, where do you think you've gone?" or something like that. And he picks up the ring and he starts like twirling it and spinning it, and it's just like this thing that has no power over him at all.
Yeah.
And I loved how Faraday in that conversation mentioned, yeah, his heart is just so full. His soul, I think is how he put it, is just so full and brimming over with the good that there's no space for darkness to be in there.
Mhm.
There's no darkness has no quarter in his soul. And for us to say that there is a human alive um, that has no quarter for even a glimmer of light to then start, overcoming
Yeah.
those dark and evil patterns. Um, I don't know. That's not a concept that I can buy into for some reason. Um, and so perhaps that's naive, and perhaps that puts me in vulnerable positions.
Mhm.
Most certainly, it probably does. Um, I've just always had trouble with the concept of just like completely cutting somebody off or cutting somebody out, and perhaps, to my detriment in some places where it probably would be more healthy for me to set better limits. Um, but part of my problem with setting boundaries, I think, is rooted in a little bit of a good thing that isn't quite as developed or tended that part of my garden as it needs to be, that says that person um, is valuable
Mhm.
because they're a person, uh, even if they do and say the most horrible things and act in the most horrible ways towards others, or perhaps towards me, and have really hurt others and have really hurt me in ways
Yeah.
and damaged, uh, wrought damage in irreparable ways. Um, does that mean that they need to be completely, I don't know what the right word is, but just left for dead, abandoned, um, cast out
Yeah.
from, uh, I don't know how to put it. I don't know how to put it into words, but my answer that I can't waver from is no. I don't think so. And maybe it's not
Yeah.
it's not my job to try to bring them along or to redeem them. It's certainly not my job to do that.
Yeah.
But it's also not my job to condemn them.
Yeah. Well, it's that idea of like God's the only one who can make the choice of what's redeemed and what isn't.
Hmm.
Um, but there's certainly a place where we can act within that process of like there's something that we can enact in the participation with that. Like it certainly seems that we can at least make our case towards God if we look at the stories in the Bible, and that recognition of like if I really do believe that nothing is unredeemable, I have to at least act as if that is true,
Hmm.
even in the face of my own vulnerability. And
Hmm.
I think often I don't have the courage to act as strongly as I believe in my head.
Hmm.
And that begs the question: do I really believe it in my head? But I really think I do.
Yeah.
It's the failing in me, not the belief in my head that I think is probably what's wrong.
Hmm.
But yeah, Donald Miller. I don't remember which one of his books, but in one of his books, he talks about like the lifeboat theory. Have you heard about that?
Is Donald Miller, is that the Blue Lake Jazz guy?
Yes.
Yeah, I've listened to that book, um, but I can't remember the lifeboat. Maybe if
I
you say
don't
more
think it
about it.
was in that one. I think it was in Searching for God Knows What, but I can't quite remember. I quite like Donald Miller. I think he,
That's a funny title.
yeah. But like he talks about this lifeboat theory and how like it's like this psychological thought experiment where it's like, okay, you've got a doctor, you've got a kid, you got a mother, you got a priest, and they're all in this lifeboat, and you have to throw two out. Who do you throw out?
Hmm.
And um, the choices that you make about who you throw out of the boat tells you what you think about the value of a certain people based on like different qualities about them. And what he makes is this argument that in God's eyes, like everybody is equally valuable in that lifeboat.
Hmm.
Like he's not making those decisions in a lifeboat. And like often our choices of who we associate with are kind of in that mind of like, well, if I associate with this person, are they going to think I think they're worthy to be in the lifeboat?
Mm,
And that kind of makes you, yeah, think about how do I get in the mindset of Jesus of like my association with someone doesn't mean that I automatically think that everything they're doing is a good, because that would be
mhm.
impossible. I couldn't associate with anybody if I thought everything that everyone did. I couldn't associate with
I
myself.
could associate with myself, right?
Yeah, I like I couldn't. But yeah, that ability to say, okay, that kindness that we can give to people could open the door to a path that um, help them see the love and like the redemption that God is offering, at
Yeah.
least that I believe He's offering.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think any step that I do to kind of sidestep that. I mean, certainly there are healthy ways of like saying, okay, I can't do this for you right now. Like there's discernments to be made, but I think often the decisions we make to distance ourselves are often social, so that we don't get lumped in with
Hmm.
this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, it's so human. But I think since I read that in that book, I've been fighting it every day of like, I don't want to be the person who thinks I get to decide who gets thrown out of the lifeboat.
Hmm.
Like, my reputation be damned. um, and yeah, like there's that sense of it's foolish, but that there's the upside down kingdom of like the things that we think are proper and right are often not as we see them in our most human state.
I think what you are describing right there about yourself is one of the things that I love most about the way you go about things here in this space.
Mm.
Like I've mentioned to this, I mentioned this to you like in our personal like our direct message, the time that you called into like Pine Creek Doug's channel, right? Like I think that's I think that was representative of, the way you go about approaching people. Like and I want to say like you had a similar type spirit about you in a conversation that you had where you jumped onto like one of Nathan's live streams.
Mm.
And I think that what you were just describing about your approach just kind of like really shines through, particularly in those types of conversations where um, I think those are two examples of people who, whether intentionally or not, come across as adversarial.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you have that quality, and I think Paul has that quality, Paul Vanderklay, of stepping into these assumed adversarial spaces and not being adversarial somehow. Um,
Mm.
and I don't know. It's just what I'm trying to do is pay you a compliment because I appreciate you being able to, reflect that out there for people to be able to take in and receive. So I appreciate that.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's always been my quality. It's something I learned, and like the adversarial tendency is the thing I fight in myself because it's the thing that I don't feel like is right, because I don't think they're my enemy. I don't think they're my adversary. And I do think they have something to add, even if I disagree with what they say.
Hmm.
Now, there's varying levels to helpfulness with it, and you kind of have to figure that out. But I don't know. I think I was talking about this on a Girl Country live stream the other day, but I look at the stories of Jesus and I can't get past the sense that he did say harsh words to people, and
Hmm.
he acted in ways that kind of boggle your head of like, wow, that was very aggressive, or that like there was this like power within him that
That
kind
seemed
of
unkind.
flips. Yes, that seemed unkind. It flips the sense of kindness.
Hmm.
Yet when I really look into those stories, the most often times the harshest is when he's speaking to the people who he is most closely aligned to, such as the
Mm,
Pharisees.
yeah.
And what he
Yep.
did, the people who were most different to him, the tax collectors, the prostitutes, the people of, um, you know, uh, unreproached.
Dregs of
What's the word?
society,
Yes, yes, yes,
people of
yes.
ill repute.
Ill repose. Yes, 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 exactly. He had dinner with them. He sat and he went to their parties and he went to their
Yeah.
houses and he saw them as human beings. And it's like if I'm really a follower of Jesus, what a better icon than Jesus himself. And so, you know, I'm never gonna placate what I believe. If somebody asks me what I believe, yeah, I mean, you just look at my life and I'll tell you. But that's so the way that what it means to treat someone who's as a human, even if they totally disagree with what I believe. That's and that's what I think is beautiful about this little corner. It is people first. It is trying to love people and show them kindness, even if we don't agree on anything.
Mhm.
And it's also bearing what might be perceived as unkindness, even if it is unkindness,
Mhm.
in a kind manner, and not returning that unkindness for evil.
Yeah.
Like that's what I think the whole corner is about and what I find very beautiful about it. And that's where I think when I ask the question, has the internet made it better for me to be kind or worse? It certainly opens the door for me to be more unkind than I'd ever be. But thankfully, through it, it's shown me how to be more kind and it's opened me up to a space of kindness that feels more rightly balanced instead of just like nice words and soft placation.
Yeah.
It's, you know, holding to beliefs strongly and sometimes even harshly, but with that level of not losing the dignity of the human being that hides behind that mask of beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's it becomes very easy, uh quick. What is it that I'm trying to say? Um, it seems like it can like turn in an instant, to where you'll start to see someone as something, and it's basically it's like you're projecting this false version of them onto them because of something that you heard them say and a way that that comes through your filters of understanding the world, and immediately they are, the enemy. And how much of that is actually true versus how much of that am I like putting onto that person? And that's part of the thing that, when I'm closer to being in my right mind, that I try to remember and just say, okay, even if I am right about what I'm projecting onto them, I can't be 100% right with that projection. There's got to be some way that I'm misinterpreting or I'm misconstruing, or misapplying, who it is that they are or what it is that they're saying. And just trying to remember that, yeah, like you had said earlier, this person is actually not my enemy, to pull back from our evangelical roots. We battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. That's something that's like drilled into you, in youth group and in our, various sermons that we attended. And I could tell by you nodding your head that you've heard that multiple times and certainly, probably read it once or twice. Um,
So,
and it's
even
just
in the
like, it's,
Orthodox, even in the Orthodox frame, you hear it. Like probably
yeah.
even more in the Orthodox frame, but
Yeah, and it's like, it's this idea of, the thing that is bothering you about this other person is at a much deeper level than the person themselves.
Mhm.
Um, and even if you keep that on one particular level, that people who maybe have trouble opening up to less of a materialistic frame, at the very least, that person believes what they do today because of all the cumulative experiences and relationships and interactions and information that they've been exposed to up until this very moment that you're having that conversation with them. And it's driven by more than just, I'm getting lost in what I'm trying to say. I think the point is we're complicated. So
Yes.
people
Well,
are
and
complicated.
I think what's interesting too is like even if I'm 100% right about my perception of that person, that tells nothing about me. That says nothing about who I am and what what right position that I'm in, which is
Mhm.
what I should be more worried about than them being right.
Yeah.
Like the plank in my own eye, right? And so it's so easy to kind of try to filter out the bad faith actors and find a smart way to outsmart them. And I don't know, I'm just not really interested in um that venture.
Mhm.
I'm more, you know, even if I am faced with a bad faith actor, like if let's say I am, if I deal with them with true sincerity,
Mhm.
it honestly kind of loses the fun of it, right?
Yeah.
Because what they really want is like a negative reaction.
Right.
When someone's sincere with that, trying to be as kind as they can with that,
Yeah.
yeah, you can call them stupid. Me, I don't care. Call me stupid. I'm pretty stupid. I've done a lot of stupid things in my life. You know, I won't. I can take that. But it just, to me, it. I would rather do that than try to outwit and outmatch someone and weed them out and be
Mhm.
some sort of like mirror for them to see where they're wrong. It's like, okay, I really think I've gotten to the, I would rather know where I'm wrong than prove everybody else wrong.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes that means entering arenas where you're having to kind of have that back and forth where it's like, you know, steel manning each other and like
Mhm.
having that fight about what I believe and what you believe and whatever. That's that arena can be good, but I think it just opens up to some tricky things if you're not rightly oriented. So
Mhm.
I always move into those spaces with hesitance. Yeah, anyways,
Well,
um,
of the times that I've seen it recorded on the internet, I thought you've done an admirable job, to put it mildly.
thank you. I appreciate that. That's good. That's good to hear. I trust your opinion, so I'm grateful to hear it. Um, well, any sort of last thoughts before we land the plane?
Well, I guess, do we have enough
We've
time to
gone
do a,
quite a lot of places.
we have, and yeah, I guess we don't have time to do like a full out Barbie review, do we? Here we are a little over a year later.
That'll have to be the next one.
We'll have to, yeah, we'll
We'll
have to
set
do
up some
that.
time and we can I'll rewatch Barbie and we can have a full on Barbie breakdown.
We'll have to do that, and we'll have to intertwine Taylor Swift and C.S. Lewis because, as you know, I shared that little clip with you. There is a slight C.S. Lewis and Taylor Swift crossover, and
Yes.
there's also a Barbie and C.S. Lewis crossover because of Greta Gerwig. She's supposedly working on a Narnia project for
Mm-hmm.
Netflix. So there, we could probably have some interesting conversations about those things.
Yeah, well, everybody calls Taylor Swift life Barbie. So I think, yeah, what a great next conversation. We'll weave Barbie, Taylor Swift, and C.S. Lewis, and see if we can come up with the next great apologetic work by the
There,
great female minds of pop culture.
that's right. We could do it. Yeah, because we'll the great female minds of our culture: Taylor Swift, Greta Gerwig, and Cassidy. So I think we'll be good.
I do not claim that third one, but you know, I appreciate it. Stoke my ego. I don't need it. Uh, well, thanks for doing this with me, Jeff. I think we did, even with some of the technical difficulties. I think there was a lot of
Yeah,
good stuff in there.
yeah, and I trust your editing skills to make this look like, chef's kiss perfect,
Yeah.
where nobody will even know these technical difficulties that we're talking about. Um, the other thing that I wanted to say is, yeah, uh, hopefully someday we can do a version of this like I've been jealous of seeing other people do, where they're in the same space
Yes.
with you, right? Where we're actually
Yes.
sitting there. I would actually feel like I was on a podcast for the first time if I ever got to do that. I've actually never done that before, where it's two people sitting next to each other with microphones going.
Uh, well, the seat is always reserved for you, Jeff. Come over to the Netherlands. We'll
Yeah,
for
well,
sure do it.
I'll
I
just
didn't
come
want
right
to.
back.
I didn't want to offer it last time because you had such short time and
Yeah, it
your
was
son was
so
there.
limited.
And
Yep.
but no, that would be great. I mean, I've thought about that too, of like, should I make this um like, well, when I first started, I was like, I want to make all of my interviews in person because
Hmm.
there's such a difference in what you can do in person. But it's like that has its downfalls too.
Hmm.
It's tricky both ways, but there is something kind of beautiful about being in the same, having to worry about um, any technical difficulties or if you can be heard or all those things. But no, that would be really fun to have you um, in the room.
Yep. Or on the back porch, as it were, for the in the weeds
Yes.
discussions.
Yeah. Yes, our back porch. Yeah, next time we'll make it happen.
Let's do it.
Walking through the forgotten garden. Seems like rain